On today's episode of Axe Hacks, we're going to be installing this Fishman Fluence modern pickup set into my new Strandberg Boden OS7. Okay, so before we dive into the install of the Fishmans, I wanted to go over this particular guitar really quick. For those of you that paid attention to everything that was released in NAMM this year, NAMM 2015 back in January, you may have seen that my friends at Gear Gods did an interview with Eller Strandberg, the owner of the company, as he sort of introduced the Strandberg Boden OS line, or rather the OS7 line, to the US. In that video, he had a red OS7, and that was actually this very guitar. Not the same model, this actual guitar. I picked it up from Ed Yoon, who is in charge of quality control for all the OS7s that are being released in the US. Very cool guy. So yeah, I felt super, super lucky that I got to pick up this actual guitar. So to anyone that's been paying attention to my Axe Hacks channel, you know that I'm normally very partial to Ibanez guitars. I've tried tons and tons of other guitars, always been very partial to Ibanez. When I saw the announcement for the Strandberg Boden OS7 line, I was very intrigued, and when I got to try them out at NAMM, I was pretty much sold right away. The Endurneck is very unique, very cool, very easy to get used to. The first thing I noticed when I picked this guy up is the weight is just ridiculously light. It hovers right around 5 pounds with the EMGs. I know the Japanese model is a little bit lighter because it comes with the lace alumitones, which really pretty much weigh nothing. As far as other features of this guitar, it has a flame maple top. You can actually see, we'll get up close later, but you can see how thick the top is. It's probably about 1/4 of an inch thick, and then it goes into the chambered swamp ash body. I opted for the bird's eye maple fretboard, maple neck, stainless steel frets. As far as other features, it comes with a proprietary aluminum bridge design, ebony knobs, which is very cool, a nice high quality switch. I believe this is a Switchcraft switch, which I was stoked about to see they put that on there. Really the only thing on the US model of this guitar that I'm not a huge fan of is the pickups. Now they are the EMG 707X series, which is a huge step up from the normal 707s, but my issue with these is that there isn't enough of a difference in tone between the bridge and the neck positions. Let me show you real quick. Okay, so we have the bridge and the neck. Or some sort of lead tone. Here's the bridge. And the neck. So while you can tell the difference, it's not super dramatic. I like to have a very obvious difference in the tone between the bridge and the neck pickup, especially on the higher strings for playing leads. In my opinion, the main fault with the 707X set is that the neck pickup is just not really that fluid. It still has too much treble in its EQ curve. It sounds a little too much like a bridge pickup rather than a fluid dynamic neck pickup. So with that, we're gonna try out the Fishman Fluence set. Okay, so working on a Strandberg. As I mentioned just a minute ago, all of the hardware on this guitar is very proprietary, complete Eller Strandberg design. Kind of had to relearn how to work on these guitars a little bit from scratch. But what I love about them is absolutely every aspect of the design makes complete sense. It's all very minimal. very functional. I absolutely love it. So first thing we're going to do is release the tension on the strings. That's done with the tuners here at the back. Just turn these counterclockwise. All right, and once you have the tension relieved, go ahead and release the locking Allen posts up here at the nut. Okay, now that the strings are free, let's go ahead and flip it over. So the main reason I'm flipping it over now is because since I am new to working on Strandbergs, I'm not sure how much slack they leave for the pickup wiring. So I want to make sure that when we unscrew the EMGs out of the top, when we pull them up to unplug them, it's not going to be pulling on wiring that's too short. What's cool about these Boden OSs is that this cover plate is actually made out of stained maple. The downside of that is they can be a little difficult to remove. The easiest way that I've found is to get something really thin but strong at the same time. I've been using this flat blade X-Acto knife. Just be careful and slip it down in between and then just pry up and it'll pop right out. So now that I can see the inside of this rear panel, it looks like they have done a fairly tidy wiring job. Keeping everything together is just a zip tie right here, so I'm going to clip that. And now that should give me enough slack to pull the pickups out of the front. Okay, interesting. So it looks like the way that they put this together, I know that a lot of guitar manufacturers, since these EMG plugs are so small, they'll just make the routes big enough to feed these in from the cavity, or rather from the control cavity into the pickup cavity, you know, routing everything that direction. In these, in the Strandberg specifically, it doesn't look like the routes right here are big enough for this connector to pass through. So we're going to need to disconnect it on the backside first from the potentiometers and everything before we can really get into removing the cabling. Okay, so it looks like each pickup lead has a thick white cable and a bright red cable coming off of it. So digging this wiring out, it looks like we have the two bright red cables joined together to this kind of pale red cable under some heat shrink tubing here. So let's cut this off, and I'm just going to desolder it. Okay, so all the red cables have been desoldered. And now each thick white cable has a smaller white and black coming out of it. So I'm just going to desolder those. Okay, so now we have our thicker white cable, our other thicker white cable, and both bright red cables free. So now we can remove the harness. for each pickup. There's the bridge. And the neck. And you can see we have the red and black cables running across the bottom of the bridge pickup cavity right here. Those are going over to the 9-volt battery harness over here. So that's pretty straightforward. Now we're just going to get rid of the rest of these stock electronics. So interesting detail about removing this volume knob is I have the nut off and it's not tight in the wood, but it won't back out because it's actually being blocked by the output jack back here. If we look at the way this output jack is set up, I'm not really sure if this was just an early run thing with the OS7s or if this is how all Bodens are put together, but basically there's this, it's a barrel style output jack, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lock washers kind of acting as a spacer, and then the nut on the back of those to tighten the whole assembly down. It doesn't really seem like the most well thought out output jack situation, considering how much thought went into everything else on the guitar. So when we get this removed, I'm not so sure I'll be reinstalling the same, everything back in the same order. Okay, and now with the output jack disconnected, we're free to remove it. Remove all these lock washers that were back there, the nut, and both potentiometers and the switch. Okay, so I got out all the wires and cabling that came with the Fishman pickup set, and I think I'm just gonna go ahead and follow the included schematic that they give you printed out. In this schematic, it's telling me to use the black and red included 9-volt battery clip, which I will actually swap out the one that came in the guitar for this one. This one just looks to be a little bit higher quality. It's telling me to use both cables that have white, black, and red leads coming out of them. And finally, it's telling me to use the two larger terminal plugs, one with blue and green and one with yellow and orange. In addition to the wiring, it's saying to use the one capacitor for the high frequency roll off on the tone knob. In addition to those, we have one normal potentiometer and one push-pull potentiometer. Again, since these are active electronics, they're going to be the specified value for actives, which is 25K, so you definitely don't want to try installing the Fishmans with a regular set of potentiometers. And then as far as the mounting screws for my Strandberg specifically, I'm going to go ahead and reuse the mounting screws that it came with for two different reasons. One, they are noticeably shorter than the screws that came with the Fishmans. This longer one here is the one that came with the Fishmans. And the last thing I want when I'm tightening these down is to have the tip of this screw poke through the back of the body. The other reason is that the threads are a bit different. The threads on the the original screws are a little bit finer, so I just don't want to, you know, shove a new thread down in there that's going to remount the wood any more than it needs to be. Okay, so let's pull the wiring for this battery clip. Should be really straightforward. Just going to get the battery out of here. There we go. We'll unclip that. Grab our new clip here. Clip that on. And now that I'm looking at how this is routed, it's going to be much easier to feed the new cabling if we pull this battery clip cover. Okay, there's the battery holder. And now I can feel in here super easily where the routes for the battery cabling are. Be sure to feed this through the battery holder. We can even clip this back together if we want. And we're just going to route this. There we go. Now you can see that coming through. We'll just feed that all the way through the cavity. Awesome, good to go. That look to be about the exact same length as the original battery clip wires that were in here. So since the wiring from the neck pickup goes through the bridge pickup's cavity, let's go ahead and install the neck first. And looking at the diagram here, it looks like we're going to be using the cabling that has the white, red, and black leads with the thick white jacket, as well as the green and blue plug. So on the back, let's see, and you can tell which pickup is the neck position, which is the bridge position. If you look under here and you see in this particular set, the Alnico magnet is always going to be the neck, and the ceramic is always going to be the bridge. So that's going to be the easiest way to tell them apart. So we'll take the neck for right now, and we know this is going to install like this. I also wanted to mention, after I got the EMGs out, I did a little comparison between the two, and the Fishmans are actually slightly lighter weight than the EMGs are, which is kind of cool. So let's take our wiring, and for anybody that's installed EMGs before, this concept is going to be very, very similar. You want to make sure that there's a little arrow visible on top of the terminal itself, and then you're just going to slide this on. There we go. So that's the first connection, and the second one right here, same deal. Just going to make sure the arrow's facing up and plug that onto the 3-prong. There we go. So that's it for connecting the terminals to the neck pickup. There are a couple more leads left here on the output of the PC board. One is labeled ground, one is labeled V1 gain. In this particular setup, we're not going to use either of those. And then the Fishman pickups do come with this really nice 3M high density foam that we're going to use as our spring to adjust the pickup height. So I'm just going to put one of these right here. Okay, the neck pickup is in and done. Let's continue the wiring through the bridge cavity and into the control cavity. And just pull those through. Coil those up for now. All right, looking good. Now our next step here is going to be to mount the bridge pickup. So for this one, we're going to grab the 3-prong, or rather the 3-terminal connector that has the white, black, and red leads coming off of it with the thicker black jacket. And again, arrow facing up. And slide that onto the 3-pin terminal. And then we're going to get the 4-pin connector, arrow facing up, and slide that onto these lower 4 pins. So now we can take these and run these through into the control cavity. Okay, and we'll get our 3-in pads stuck on here. And I'm just buttoning these up right to the edge of the mounting screw holes. Okay, so with these routing designs where the wiring for the neck pickup comes down through the bridge pickup cavity, a lot of the time the wiring for the neck pickup is going to want to lay right down on top of the mounting screw hole, which we definitely don't want. So what I like to do is just kind of make a little loop right here so that it comes from the neck pickup, loops around, and kind of takes a wider turn to go into the control cavity. So now that that is all set up, just ease this guy down into place. There we go. Now we can grab those mounting screws. Before we dive into wiring the pots, I want to go ahead and get the switch all wired up. And actually comparing the little jumper wires on this actual switch to the diagram that came with the Fluences, it's already wired the same as what the EMGs would be. So we're going to pull all these leads out of the cavity, and we're basically just going to follow the diagram. So first thing it's saying is to take the thicker black housing that we know is coming from the bridge pickup, and inside of this thicker black housing is 2 wires. It's going to be the smaller white and the smaller black wire that we saw up at the terminal end of the wire. So these all have a little length of heat shrink on here. We might want to just take some wire clippers and clip that off. We know that the white and black wires in here are going to be going to different destinations inside of the control cavity. Let's pull off maybe 2 to 3 inches of this thicker black shielding. Okay, so now that I have that off, I can actually see that once inside of this thicker black housing, the small black wire that we saw on the other end is not actually a small black wire, it is a shield. So we'll take all these separate strands and just twist those back into a usable wire. Okay, now following along with the diagram, we're going to take the white wire coming from the bridge pickup and hook that up to this first terminal on the switch. And for anyone that has installed a set of pickups before, you know that these shielding wraps almost always end up going to the back of a potentiometer to be grounded. So we'll just keep that in mind with this one. And now it looks like the next thing to connect is going to be the white wire inside of the thicker white housing. That's going to be for the neck pickup. Okay, so for the neck pickup's white wire, we are going to solder this on the switch to this second to last connection right here on the other side. Okay, now for the switch, that actually seems to be it. The next really easy, really straightforward connection that we need to make is for the 3 power cables that are going to go to the positive terminal of the 9-volt. So we can take these over here and just trim a little bit off the end of each one of these red wires. What I'm going to do is take these 2 leads, twist them up together, and throw a short length of heat shrink tubing over them. Then I'm going to take one of my alligator clips over here and clamp these together in the way that I want them to be soldered, while still leaving the metal exposed that I want to solder. And we'll get these 3 soldered together. Okay, so now we have all 3 of these soldered together in a nice consolidated order. And we can slide the heat shrink over this and just get the soldering iron sort of close to it. And that'll shrink right up to the wires. All right, so there's our battery leads all taken care of. Okay, now we have all the wiring done on the switch that's going to need to be done. So let's go ahead and actually reinstall that into the top of the guitar just to kind of keep it out of our way. So let's start by scuffing up the back of the pot where we're going to be soldering. I found this always helps the solder to adhere much more quickly. So I'm scuffing that 3rd lug, or rather scuffing for that 3rd lug. I'm going to bend up. And I'm going to solder that to the chassis of the pot. Okay, now I take the black wire from the switch and we're going to install this to the 1st lug right here. Okay, and along with the black wire from the switch, we're also going to install a lead to go from this pot to a terminal on our tone pot. Okay, and it looks like the last terminal connection that we need to make on this potentiometer is going to be for our output jack. So since the Strandberg has its output jack very close to the volume pot, Just gonna get a short length of wire here. Okay, now let's take care of some ground connections. So according to the diagram, the ground connections that it wants attached to this pot include both grounds from the pickups. So we got this longer one and this longer one right here. And it looks like the third one is just going to be a ground going to the tone pot. So one thing I did just realize is even though these are active pickups, it is giving us a location for the bridge ground. In this Strandberg, since it came with the EMG 707s, it doesn't have a bridge ground. So I tried doing a little bit of research, and nobody seems to have mentioned the necessity for or against a bridge ground wire with the Fishman Fluence set. So since this guitar isn't routed for one, let's go ahead and try and finish the install without it. And if we get crazy buzzing that goes away when we touch the strings, then we know that we're gonna have to route a hole and connect a bridge ground. So I hope we don't have to do that, but let's just proceed with the install and see if that's something that we run into. Okay, so I'm gonna get my little jumper ground that's gonna go from this pot over to my tone pot. And I'm also gonna be deliberate in the placement of these ground connections. I'm gonna place them on the far edge of the tone pot right here. And the reason for that is that kind of a weird design quirk of the Boden OS, where the output jack enters the control cavity. It is an extremely close tolerance to the back of the volume pot. In fact, it does touch the edge of the output jack barrel right here, does touch the back of the volume pot, kind of like that. So what I'm going to do is make sure that this is set up as far as possible on the edge of the pot so that that will be in as little interference as possible. Okay, so now that we have all the connections to the volume pot done that we're going to need, let's go ahead and thread that back into the top of the guitar. So with the last remaining colored wires that we have coming off of the pickups themselves, we have the yellow and orange pair and the blue and green pair. We're actually only going to be using one of each one of these pairs and just kind of setting the other one aside. So it looks like in the green and blue pair, we are only going to be using the green out of the two. And in the yellow and orange pair, we're only going to be using the orange. Okay, and it looks like the green and orange are actually going to be hooked up together. So let's make sure we don't have any other wires in between them. Even though I am leaving the full length of these wires, it's always a good idea to try to keep this rat's nest of cabling as clean as possible. It's looking pretty good. So now we'll get our green and orange. twist those together, and it looks like those are going to go through on our push-pull pot here, this bottom lug right here. So push-pull pots don't have a ton of clearance before you start hitting other connections that you don't want to, so I'm going to try to make this as clean as possible. This might actually be easier to get both of them in one at a time. So green is already through. Okay, first connection done for the push-pull. All right, it looks like the next fairly easy one we can do is the capacitor. So this one is going to go between this first lug over here on the potentiometer itself and just to a ground of some sort. Okay, and since I am primarily making this video for people interested in, you know, switching from a set of active EMGs to a set of Fishmans, even more specifically on the Strandberg Boden OS, one thing that I have been doing for a lot of these interconnecting wires is just stealing them from the original EMG wiring. So I just took this longer black wire. I'm going to use a short length of it to go in between the ground that I just created here, and I'm actually going to thread it through these two middle terminals on the left and right sides right there. So I'll actually start with that part, and that'll give me a better gauge of how long I need to make the rest of the wire. Okay, so now I have our wire with about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch of it bare. I'm just going to thread this straight through these two. 1, 2, and bend it down on the other side so it doesn't go anywhere. There we go. Okay, and now those can be soldered into place. So like I said earlier, the clearance on these push-pull pots can be pretty tight. So I'm just going to get in here, solder this inside part first. Solder the outside. And once both lugs are done, we can clip any excess from the outside. And now we have a better gauge of how long this needs to be to make it down to the edge of the pot to meet this other ground connection. Okay, so now we also need to get our ground from the volume pot and get that connected to the chassis of our tone pot somewhere. So I'm going to set this up so that I can solder that to the opposite side, just because when it's all installed I think it'll look a little bit cleaner. Okay, and now I believe we just have one more connection coming from the volume knob that needs to be taken care of, and that is this white cable that was connected to the first lug of the volume pot needs to come over to the middle lug of our tone pot. So one last thing that I noticed is where we connected that ground wire from the chassis of the volume pot to the chassis of the tone pot, we also need to connect, and again I'm just going to use some of this length of stolen wire from the EMG wiring. We need to connect a ground wire to go to our output jack. So now that the wiring for the tone pot has been completed, let's go ahead and throw its lock washer underneath and guide it down to its hole. That is a very tight fit. It looks like it does actually technically fit, but you have to shove the back of this push-pull down into the Strandberg cavity. That's a little scary, but alas, it does fit, and I really hope it doesn't need to come back out for any reason. Okay, and the last thing we need to connect before we start kind of cleaning all this up is that output jack. So as I mentioned earlier, it has a little bit of a clearance issue, which I can show you now. When this comes through, it actually hits the back of the volume pot right there. So I'm going to do a couple of things. First thing, although I'm sure this isn't necessary, just as a precaution, also just to prevent any unnecessary wear and tear, I'm going to throw a bit of electrical tape over the back of the pot where I know that's going to come in contact. Okay, so it looks like what I'll actually need to do is get the lock washer, and nut started here in the body of the guitar. And then while everything is still able to move around and shift a little bit, I'll get the actual wiring taken care of and then get this really tightened down. Okay, so on these barrel style jacks that the OS comes with, the pinout can be a little confusing. So you're going to take the hot wire, or the one coming from the middle terminal on the volume pot, and we're going to run that to the shortest little connection here on the barrel jack. The next one can be that ground that we just connected to the edge of the tone potentiometer. So I'm going to give us a fresh lead off of this. Okay, and this ground is going to go to what's called our sleeve connection, which is actually, I believe, technically going to be the middle length of terminal coming out of the bottom here. It's also probably going to be the biggest one. And lastly, the wire coming from our battery clip, the black wire, is going to go on, let's see, I guess this would be considered the ring of the barrel jack internally. So all stereo jacks are also considered TRS jacks if they're in a 1/4 inch configuration like this. TRS standing for tip ring sleeve. So this is connecting to the ring, which is the middle of the inside of the jack. Okay, so we have that last wire soldered. Hopefully for the project, if we don't end up needing that bridge ground connection, let's get this tightened down and then we'll get to cleaning up some wiring. Okay, so what I'm guessing is the reason why they used all of those lock washers as a spacer essentially was to bring the nut back far enough so that they could get some sort of other tool on it to tighten it. I'm just going to use a nice long set of needle nose pliers to reach in here like this and get it tightened down. And when you're zip tying cabling like this, you definitely don't want to over tighten anything. Just get it tight enough to where it holds it and it's not going to go anywhere. Then we can pretty much just lay this down and call it good on our wiring. Make sure that nothing else is going to get in the way when we're switching pickup positions. Just keep this down and off to the side right there. It's looking good. We can throw our cavity cover back over it right here. And now with that back panel in place, we just need to get our ebony knobs reconnected. Okay, well, we're back. I got the guitar hooked up and there was a little bit of underlying buzz. What I did to test to see if grounding the bridge would help it out is I just pulled up our new push-pull tone pot, and that exposes just a little bit of the metal to the knob underneath, and just ran a test wire touching that and touching one of the string saddles, and the buzz pretty much completely went away. So even though these are active pickups, we are going to have to actually drill a small route, just as we would have to with this set of passives, to get the bridge assembly grounded. I emailed Ola about this, about kind of the best way to go about it. And he recommended getting a kind of a longer than normal 3mm drill bit. Since I'm in the States and most drill bits aren't in millimeters, I picked up this guy. Apparently this is referred to as an aircraft drill bit. It is slightly smaller than 3mm. So I'm gonna be using that. It was like $3 at the hardware store. I'm gonna be using that, and what we're gonna do is remove these two string saddles. One thing that I realized as soon as I started thinking about, you know, how this bridge design differs from traditional guitar bridges is that all of these are mounted separately to the body. So mounting one bridge or one saddle assembly is only going to technically ground that string, but you have to remember that these guitars have a 0 fret right here that is going to continue the grounding across all the other strings. So a little bit different design, but it's essentially the exact same principle as a traditional bridge. So let's go ahead and remove these two, and before we do that, so that I don't have to reset the intonation when I'm putting it back together, I'm gonna grab a couple small pieces of tape and mark where those two saddles are. Okay, and now I have the ends of those saddles marked off. Let's go ahead and remove these two saddles. And under each one of these, which is actually, this is very important to the grounding of the bridge, sitting up underneath where the saddle height adjustment screw is a very, very small spring. This spring is actually going to act as one of the conducting components to ground the whole system. So when you take these off, be absolutely sure to keep very, very close track of this spring. And then we only have to remove the base for the high E string. Okay, we got our base out. So what we're gonna do now is take our drill, and I asked, when I was emailing Ola, I asked for, you know, if he suggests a specific angle to drill this at, and he said that he pretty much eyeballs it. So really all we're gonna do is take our drill and go in at an angle. I removed this second saddle to give me clearance for the angle, and it looks like I should be able to get, you know, a hole going that's at plenty steep enough of an angle to get into the control cavity without having to remove this third saddle, but we can definitely do that if it comes down to it. And just to protect it, I'm going to tape it off as well. Okay, nice and protected. And let's see what we're working with going in. So if I go in just under the volume knob, and that'll be okay. That would kind of come out on a side of the knob that I don't have the best access to. Let's see if we go in at kind of a forward angle like this and try to come out on the other side of it. That'll be closer to the middle of the cavity. Not that it really matters, but I'm just a little nitpicky about stuff like that. What we're gonna do once the hole is drilled is we're basically gonna run the wire through it, loop a bare end of the wire up and over just a little bit into this front screw hole, so that this will be kind of the grounding path. When the screw is set back in, touching the wire, our tiny spring that I mentioned earlier is going to sit on the head of the screw. That is going to go up and touch the underside of the high ease string saddle. And then, as I explained, that'll go up the E string and continue to ground all of the other ones across the 0 fret. So definitely a different way to ground all the strings, but it should work just fine. All right, just to get a little bit better angle on drilling the hole, I am actually going to mark and remove this third tuning machine just to get the angle a little bit steeper. Okay, so I'm gonna go in at a little bit better of an angle. The thing I'm trying to avoid, and actually I'm gonna tape this too, is I don't wanna scuff the edge of you know, the finish right in between these two bridge saddle seats. So I'm gonna put some tape down right there as well. Angle that ended up working is a very steep angle, pretty much straight on like this, aiming it just above, you know, kind of like that, just above the volume pot. And when I say pretty steep, I mean like, you know, this, it was absolutely necessary to remove both of these additional tuning machines. Okay, that's right at the edge of the control cavity right now, so I'm gonna mark where that bit's going into the wood right now and pull it back out. And that's it. So specifically, that is at about 35 millimeters. So if you feel, or if you know, you're measuring and, or you're drilling and you feel as though you've been going for a little longer than you're comfortable with, pull the drill bit out, measure it. If you're going more than, you know, 35, 38 millimeters, you're probably at the wrong angle. You should pull out and restart. So we want to get our ground wire. First, let's go ahead and strip the end that's going to stay on this side. So let's cut it to length. We'll give it a good length here, like maybe 6 inches or so. Let's go ahead. I'm gonna trim off maybe a good 1/2 inch of insulation from this end of the soon-to-be ground wire and feed the other end. We'll feed that down. And like I said, I'm going to loop this back over and send it down into the hole for the mounting screw. Now if we take our base plate, keeping my tape in place, you can actually remove all this tape now. And we're just going to slide this under the tape so we don't lose our spot, our intonation spot. Okay, now we can reconnect all of our tuning machine slash bridge saddles. And remember, do not forget that spring under the saddle. Okay, we have our saddles back on. If we flip this guy over, we can now see our originally missing bridge ground wire. I'm gonna go ahead and strip a bit of its insulation back, and we'll get that soldered to our ground circuit. All right, so I got my soldering iron all heated up, and I'm gonna try to do this without removing the volume pot, because in order to remove the volume pot, I would have to remove the output jack, which is kind of a pain. So it looks like I should have enough clearance. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of loop the ground cable around and lay it facing that way on top of the existing grounds. All right, that looks great. That actually came out really clean. And that's it. All right, so we're back with the Fishman Fluences. Install totally finished. They're sounding fantastic, nice and mean. As for the tone of the neck pickup, here's some quick notes on the bridge. And in contrast, the neck. So, from what I'm hearing, it is definitely rounder than the neck pickup of the EMG set. And what's really cool about the Fishmans, kind of their main feature or selling point, is that they're dual voice pickups. So right now in their kind of default mode with the push-pull pot down, they're essentially, their voice is, I was reading an article on it today, it was sort of profiled from a variety of sort of very sought after passive pickups. So when you pull the push-pull pot, it switches the resonant peak of the bridge and neck pickups, and it switches it to a more typical active profile, if you will, a more active EQ curve in where the resonant peak is. So from what I can tell, I do prefer the passive kind of voicing more than the active. But what's cool about this is, you know, it just gives you a lot of variety. So again, here is the neck in with its passive voice, and then with its active voice. So very, very subtle, but there is a little more high end on the passive version. The active version has a little bit more of a cutoff with the really, really high frequencies. But yeah, overall, I think they sound great. I think that playability-wise and note separation-wise, they're a lot more fun to play, really, than the EMGs. Just like nice big chord. Everything's just very dynamic, super, super mean sounding on the bridge pickup. So I'm really glad I decided to switch over to the Fishmans. Routing that channel for the bridge ground wire was a little nerve-wracking, but you know, I don't plan on getting rid of this guitar anytime soon, if ever. And I'm glad that I was kind of able to take charge on that and hopefully help some of you guys out that might be installing passives or a set of Fishmans into your own OS7. It's really a fantastic guitar, fantastic pickups in my opinion. Really dig the Fishman Fluences. A lot of the other internet guys have been raving about them lately. If you want to listen to more sound clips, I know that Fluff just did a video for them. Ola England has been raving about them for a while, Ben Eller. So definitely check out some of their stuff. I can post some links down in the description. Other than that, my name's Chris. You've been watching Axe Hacks, and I will see you next time.